So I do different things. So I am a professor over in biological sciences, and I've been here for 18 years. And so I also work with the University Honors Program, just doing different things, and starting off the UHP Discover program last year. So I'm so glad that you guys are part of that. And so Megan asked me to talk about explaining your research to a general audience, which we'll go through that, and I have some questions and things that will make it a little bit more interactive, but really start to think about that. But before I do that, I'd like to hear more about you, maybe, and you guys of course know each other, hopefully, and I don't know you. So if you could say your name, your major, and maybe something about your research project that you're doing this summer, that would be great. So if you wanted to start.
So I'm Rachel. I'm
Rachel.
a double major in psychology and women's gender and sexuality studies. Okay. And my project is about what happens after pro-LGBT and anti-LGBT activists win or lose on a specific
Oh, you did
issue.
that one. Okay. And who's that with again? Can you remember?
Dr. Courier.
Okay. Oh yeah, that's a good one. That's interesting. It'll be fascinating to hear what you find out.
I'm Jillian. I'll be in political science and operations management.
Okay.
And I'm working with Dr. Moore on studying international trade relationships with a specific focus on Asia.
Yeah, he's a good one too. We had him last year. So great.
I'm Adana. I am a physics major, and I'm working with
Okay.
Anna Dejarnity and in mathematical sense making in 8th graders using a dynamic geometry system.
Oh, interesting. Oh, that's so she is it she? So College of Education?
Yes.
Okay. Okay, that's great. Oh, that's so fascinating.
And Lucy, that will probably be here.
Yeah.
She is the one with Layla.
Okay.
And then of course the Pompeii team's not here.
Yeah, yeah. No, and they just left, you said?
Well, I think Steve's been over there.
Okay.
But Emily, his
Yeah,
student,
just
just
went
left
over there.
yesterday.
Yeah, that's what it sounded like. Well, that's exciting. Well, have you guys ever done research before this, or is this your first time?
Yes.
So you've done some, Madonna,
Yes.
Jillian, Rachel. Okay. All right. Well, that helps. I'm asking these questions as I'm trying to figure out where you guys are coming from as we delve into this topic. So one of the questions I had for you, and I probably should have asked you this beforehand, is there's different ways to explain your research, and it sort of depends a little bit whether it's an oral or a written presentation, so I don't know what you guys are interested in.
Oral presentation.
So I was thinking more oral,
Yep.
but some of this also does, you could think in terms of written presentations, and maybe I'll just mention this now, and then we can come back to it later if you want. As scientists, we're sort of instructed how to write scientifically in the scientific method, and it's sort of funny, like the first time I ever wrote a scientific paper, looking back, it was like all flowery and everything, and my advisor just like, X, no, this isn't the way to do it. And you sort of get that creativity knocked out of you, as you go on in the process. And then what I found personally, just in terms of the written part, is that later on when you're asked to write, like now I do popular magazine articles sometimes. I work on invasive plants, that's one of the things. And so someone will say, can you write me an article, on why invasive plants are bad, and it has to be for a general audience. And I actually find myself struggling with that, because I instantly want to go into my comfort zone of, invasive plants are a problem for the world because, we spend $45 billion per year, per annum, blah, blah, blah. And you could just sort of see people's eyes glaze over. And so then you have to be forced to think about, okay, who is the audience? And so that's sort of the written part. So I just want you guys to think about that too. And also for your research, you should hopefully, your mentors are having you read the current literature, or they will shortly. And as you do that, what I want you to do as you read these peer-reviewed papers, keep an eye out for what you like and don't like. Look at the style of the writing, because a lot of that changes from person to person. And for example, the reason I went to graduate school is the person that I chose, I actually really liked her papers. I liked the content, but more importantly, it was accessible, I could understand it, versus other papers which had the same content and were just totally dense, and I was like lost. So I just mentioned that, just keep an eye out for the writing styles and sort of what appeals to you. So anyways, we'll focus mostly on the oral part, because that's what I wanted to do. And what I thought would be a good idea is if we just talk about out loud, if you guys have any ideas about things that you've seen and what makes you interested in that. And so this could be, I was thinking of like Nova or nature shows, or it could be a talk that someone, maybe you had a visiting professor come to your class. What engaged you in that? You guys think of any examples?
So not specifically dealing with their research, but
It could
just
be
in
anything.
general.
It could be anything. It could be, I mean, for me, I could start it off. I always loved Nova growing up. And so I would always watch Carl Sagan. And I don't know, you'd always talk about the billions and billions of stars and all this. And that to me as a little kid, it was mesmerizing, and just watching him talk. To me, that just captured me right away. I didn't even know what the heck the content was, but I'm like, this guy is so passionate, I'm following him. I don't know what's going on, but I'm gonna learn more.
We're
So,
talking about.
hi, you must be listening.
Yes.
Sweaty.
I'm Teresa.
I was telling them yesterday I was really sweaty. Or the day before, embarrassingly sweaty.
We're just kind of giving examples of, something that, a talk or a show or something that you watched or been really engaged in. What was it about that got your attention?
It could be like someone coming into your class, or it could be a TED Talk or something like that. Something that really, is there anything about it that really captured you, that appealed to you, that made you think, wow, I really got that, and I want to learn more.
I think for me, I love TED Talks, and I think for me, it's maybe the unexpected wow moment
Yeah.
of, I don't know, with the presenters especially, that tell a story
Uh-huh.
to start with. That always really gets me.
Yeah.
But then when they make some connection that I didn't expect
Right.
to the bigger importance of this,
Right.
that's of the big this.
Yeah.
That's when I'm always like, oh yeah. And it's kind of like the way that we
Yeah.
think and talk in honors, right? Like, but why does all this matter? What's your next step? That's
Yeah.
what I really.
But that person-to-person connection, is really important. I think
Yeah.
maybe is what you're getting at.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, for me personally, when I hear something and I can take that information and it's relevant to me, it's like, oh, that's really cool. I hadn't thought about that, but that is really important. Things that appeal to me are humor. Something sort of funny.
Yeah.
So things like that. So what I thought we would do is I want to show you guys an example. And there's, I'm a Mac person now, so I'm trying to figure this out. See, I don't think it's going to work. We're going to have to look on my computer. This is a talk by Hans Rosling, and he's considered to be, this is one of the highest, over 11 million, nearly 12 million views. This is one of the most popular TED Talks ever. And Hans is a statistician. So he found a problem when he started to talk about statistics. People's eyes would glaze over, they'd just be like, oh, math. And so he came up with a very unique way of making it relevant and understandable by the general public. And so I wanted to show you an example of this because he's gone on to do a whole bunch of other TED Talks with these same ideas. So he's just a really great example of how to do this. And when I first saw him, I was thinking, oh, here's this boring academic guy with this strange accent. And so I had all these preconceived notions going in, but it really started to go really great. So what we're going to do is, for some weird reason, that it's not working there, but it is working on here. So, yeah, Lucy, maybe, can you maybe just go on the other side of Megan? Madonna there, that would be perfect. Okay, so this is the best Hans Rose. Oh wait, let's see. Playlist. This is the right one. Full screen.
Well, 10 years ago, I took on the task to teach global development to Swedish undergraduate students.
It'll be about 4
That was
minutes or
after
so.
having spent about 20 years together with African institutions studying hunger in Africa. So I was sort of expected to know a little about the world. And I started in our medical university, Karolinska Institute, an undergraduate course called Global Health. But when you get that opportunity, you get a little nervous. I thought, these students coming to us actually have the highest grade you can get in Swedish college system. So I thought maybe they know everything I'm going to teach them about. So I did a pre-test when they came. And one of the questions from which I learned a lot was this one. Which country has the highest child mortality of these 5 pairs? And I put them together so that in each pair of country, one has twice the child mortality of the other. And this means that it's much bigger the difference than the uncertainty of the data. I won't put you at a test here, but it's Turkey which is highest there, Poland, Russia, Pakistan, and South Africa. And these were the results of the Swedish students. I did it so I got a confidence interval which was pretty narrow, and I got happy, of course. I had 1.8 right answer out of 5 possible. That means that there was a place for a professor of international health and for my course. But one night, when I was compiling the report, I really realized my discovery. I have shown that Swedish top students know statistically significantly less about the world than the chimpanzees. Because the chimpanzee would score half right. If I gave them 2 bananas with Sri Lanka and Turkey, they would be right half of the cases. But the students are not there. The problem for me was not ignorance, it was preconceived ideas. I did also an unethical study of the professors of the Karolinska Institute that hands out the Nobel Prize in medicine, and they are on par with the chimpanzee there. So this is where I realized that there was really a need to communicate, because the data of what's happening in the world and the child health of every country is very well aware. So we did this software which displays it like this. Every bubble here is a country. This country over here is, this is China. This is India. The size of the bubble is the population. And on this axis here, I put fertility rate. Because my students, what they said when they looked upon the world, and I asked them, what do you really think about the world? Huh? Well, I first discovered that the textbook was Tintin mainly. And they said the world is still we and them. And we is Western world, and them is third world. And what do you mean with Western world? I said, well, that's long life and small family. And third world is short life and large family. So this is what I could display here. I put fertility rate here, number of children per woman, 1, 2, 3, 4, up to about 8 children per woman. We have very good data since 1962, 1960 about, on the size of families in all countries. The error margin is narrow. Here I put life expectancy at birth, from 30 years in some countries up to about 70 years. And 1962, there was really a group of countries here that was industrialized countries, and they had small families and long lives. And these were the developing countries. They had large families and they had relatively short lives. Now, what has happened since 1962? We want to see the change. Are the students right? It's still 2 types of countries? Or have these developing countries got smaller families and they live here? Or have they got longer lives and live up there? Let's see. We stop the world. And this is all UN statistic that has been available. Here we go. Can you see that? It's China. They're moving against better health. They're improving there. All the green Latin American countries, they are moving towards smaller families. The yellow ones here are the Arabic countries, and they get larger families, but they longer lives, but not larger families. The Africans are the green down here. They still remain here. This is India. Indonesia is moving on pretty fast. And in the 80s here, you have Bangladesh still among the African countries there. But now Bangladesh, it's a miracle that happens in the 80s. The imams start to promote family planning, and they move up into that corner. And in 90s, we have the terrible HIV epidemic that takes down the life expectancy of the African countries, and all the rest of the world moves up into the corner where we have long lives and small family, and we have a completely new world.
Isn't that weird?
Let me make a comparison directly between United States of America and Vietnam.
There's one more. Yeah, we'll do this one.
America had small families and long life. Vietnam had large families and short lives. And this is what happens. The data during the war indicate
Yes,
that
it's here.
even with all the death, there was an improvement of life expectancy. By the end of the year, the family planning started in Vietnam, and they went for smaller families. And the United States up there is getting for longer life, keeping family size. And in the 80s now, they give up communist planning and they go for market economy, and it moves faster even than social life. And today we have in Vietnam the same life expectancy and the same family size here in Vietnam 2003 as in the United States 1974 by the end of the war. I think we all, if we don't look in the data, we underestimate the tremendous change in Asia, which was in social change before we saw the economical change.
So it goes on and on about that. But if you had to hear that, you had to go, you're going to go listen to this professor talk about, I don't know what it would be, statistics of world demographics or something like that. How many people will be interested. But as hopefully you saw, when you go to see it, it's maybe not what you expect. So what do you guys think is so interesting about that particular presentation?
His delivery is like very entertaining.
Mm-hmm.
He's kind of funny.
Yeah. He has that humor, which is sort of like a weird, at first I was like, I don't know if that's a joke, but I think it is. Oh yeah, it is. Yeah.
I really liked his enthusiasm. You could tell he cared for what he was
Mm-hmm.
showing.
That's a huge one. What do you guys think about the content? Did it help to see that visualization? So some way, like the standard researcher in many cases might have a table, with life expectancy and numbers and statistical, indications of what's, significant from something else. And that's informative, right? But this is a different type of presentation. It's the same data, but he's showing it in a different way. So he's actually well known for these bubble plots where you can see things move over time. But you can hear the audience, they're laughing, they get it. And so I wanted to show that example because I think that's a great example of what we can aspire to. And of course it depends on the presentation, on your content. And we're not all gonna get to that point, I'm not getting to that point. But it's just, to me, it's really fascinating. This is a really dense, complicated topic that most people would just be like, I'm going to sleep. But he's able to twist it around and to show it and give it a whole new perspective that really engages people.
Well,
So,
he did a great job of, I'm thinking back to my stats class,
Mhm.
which still sends like a shove
I
down
hated
my
mine.
spine, because I'm like,
Say
that was the worst. And I don't get it, even the
Yeah.
terminology was very murky
Yeah.
for me throughout the entire course. But I feel like he did a great job of eliminating the jargon
Mhm.
associated with it.
Mhm.
And even when he's talking about fertility and morbidity and everything, he explained that.
you
Because
say this is
not everybody
because, yeah.
got that, what
Uh-huh.
that means, so to kind of qualify what he was getting ready to talk about, you had to be on the same learning plane,
Mhm.
knowing what he was getting ready to explain.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, the
Yeah.
variables were easy, like life
Yeah.
expectancy, small family, big
Right.
family, small family,
Yeah.
and the timeline. It
Right.
just wasn't, it wasn't over our heads, it was.
That's it.
Yeah, yeah. And so this is an example, I think, of where you want to make things understandable to your audience, but you have to hit the right level, right? You don't want to be too simple, because you don't want people to feel insulted. And so I think he was able to hit that right area. So what we're going to do is I cheated and I found these online, but I can't think of any other better way to, these are just some communication strategies, and you can look at this later. Oops, sorry about that, there you go. But that's the first point here, make it simple, not simplistic. And this is sometimes as researchers, you get sort of locked into the words, and you had talked about, the language. So the example here is cell death instead of apoptosis, which, someone might rattle off right away, and other ones are like, I have no clue what you're thinking of or what you're saying. And so the third point there, public audiences are dumb. They just don't know the same things that you do. And they know a lot, but they just don't know it in the same way that you do. So one of the reasons I was happy to do this, this workshop with you guys is when I was an undergrad researcher years and years ago, I was in charge of a whole group of endangered Hawaiian plants. And this was in California in one of the greenhouses. And there was 4 big greenhouses, and I was there every day taking care of the plants and doing all these pollinations and everything. And one day I walked out, and there was the university mailman walking by, the postal guy. And he says, you know, I have a question for you. And I was like, what? And he's like, well, you know, what are you doing there? And instantly I launched into my researcher, hey, I'm gonna impress you mode, right? And I said, oh, well, I'm an undergraduate researcher and we're looking at the evolution of plant breeding systems, and specifically I'm very interested in the evolution of Gynodidaceae. And you could see him like, huh? And then, you know, oh, well, you know, that's really important because that really relates to the conservation biology of this very endangered species. And he says, you know, wait, stop. You know, I don't understand anything what you're saying. Tell me, oh, and then I said something about this is federally funded research, funded by NSF. And he says, okay, wait, stop. I don't get it. Tell me, as a taxpayer, why should I support your research? And what is it? And that was like this moment of total clarity for me, because I was like, oh, how do I say that? Because I had been conditioned so much to being talking on this higher level, you know, this is what I'm doing, I'm so proud of my research. And I keep coming back to that example every day, especially when I interact with all different groups of people, because you have to relate the importance of your research in a very interesting way that people can understand. And at first, to answer him, I didn't know what I was saying, so I said, well, you know, this is a rare endangered species, and he's like, no, I get that, but why, you know, the research? And then I had to like backtrack and say, well, you know, we're interested in why we have some plant species that have just females and hermaphrodites and others that don't, and why would a plant start switching sex? And then he was like looking at me like, what? You know, so I had to back up further and say, well, actually most plants are unlike humans in that most have both male and female function. We call those hermaphrodites. And so that's one thing that I want you guys to think about as you're developing your projects and becoming, and hopefully are now, researchers. The world of science is conditioning us to be like, explain things on this high level, which is all good, you need to be able to do that. But ultimately what it comes down to is, you might be asked by someone, why is your research important? You know, tell me on my level. And so you need to figure out how to do that, because as scientists, you can be the best scientist in the world and make the most amazing discoveries, but if you do that in isolation and you can't communicate that to other people, then it's completely worthless. So, let me minimize that. So that's why I was trying to say, you know, we're talking about things about making you interested in things. The other thing too is you guys may know this, how long do you think people actually pay attention? Like in class? Like the intensive listening time?
Isn't it like 10, 20 minutes?
It's about 15 to 18. So if you notice the typical TED Talks, how long are they? 10? Well, usually about 10. Now some of them are like 19. So
There's even a big movement at conferences and things of doing like a 7-minute lightning talk.
yeah,
Which makes so much
or
sense.
5-minute, yeah.
Yeah.
And that, by the way, if you guys ever have to do that, that is the hardest thing in the
Mhm.
world. Because then you're like, okay, what is the most important thing? And I have to distill it down. But yeah, so that's what, like when we teach these large lecture classes, I do that. And we know that students will come in, they'll be like, okay, I'm Jazz, I'm listening to you. You have about a 15-minute window before you actually start to see the students. You know, and you guys, you might see this if you start looking around the classroom, but as the instructor in the front, I can see all the students, and you start to see people, you know, like, yeah, looking around, you know, start on the computer. And so then you have to say, okay, I need to break it up, I need to do something. I tend to be really hyper, and I start running around the class, or I do something funny, you know, and everyone like, oh, okay, you know, and then they come back.
Reset.
Yeah, but that's what you have. So you have just this window of opportunity to capture people's attention. Now the other thing, and maybe you were getting at this too, is you need to know your audience, right? So who, with the TED Talk we just saw, who was the audience? We don't really know, right? It's probably everyone. It's anyone who goes to a TED Talk, right? Probably semi-well-educated people who are interested in the topic, right? Might know something about it. So let me give an example. So one of the things I study is I'm an evolutionary biologist, so I study evolution. I got my degree in evolution, ecology, and organismal biology. I can easily go into a class and talk about evolution. I can go on for hours and tell you guys about evolution and talk about it on one level. If I go home and talk to my mom about evolution, then I can't say the same things, right? Because she did finish her high school. She started in nursing and then gave up because she married my dad, and that's what he did back then. And so she's very interested, but she'll be like, whoa, slow down. I don't understand that. You need to repeat yourself. You need to tell it to me another way. So that's one level. Worse yet, if I go and talk to my father-in-law, he is a very strong creationist. So I already know right off the bat, through experience, if I start talking to him about evolution, he hears the word evolution, boom, he shuts down. He won't listen to anything else that I have to say. So I've learned. So with him, I do not say the word evolution. And I say things like, change over time, and he's okay with adaptation, but then he'll listen. So that sort of comes back to knowing your audience. So in a little bit, what we'll be doing is, I'm gonna have you guys practice explaining what you're doing, if you want to do that way, or you can explain something else that you're more familiar with. But we're going to do it to different types of audiences. So that becomes really important. So before we do the questions to ponder, let's just briefly go over these strategies. So we talked about the simple, not simplistic. And then the second one is put in the context of things. So if you're talking to an audience and you just launch right in with a bunch of words that are really on a high level but make no sense to them, you've lost them. It's sort of like, a first date, first impressions, you have to look your best because otherwise you can't repeat that. And so what I always do is when I give a presentation, I always practice the very first sentences or like my first slide so I know it down cold. And I don't know if you guys, you will have the opportunity to do presentations. And that's a whole nother beast, because I used to be really nervous doing presentations. But if you practice that first slide, you know how you have to pull back and show the whole general context. Why is this important? That's really, really key. And then the third point, the focus. Keep on track on what you're trying to say. Don't go off into tangents. And then fourth is really important, using vivid language. So I love this. So the example here is like graphene, which I have no clue what graphene is, right? So apparently it's some type of material. But the person says graphene is a razor-thin sheet that resembles chicken wire. I have no clue still what graphene is, but I know what it looks like. Because I can relate to that, right? I know what chicken wire is. I really like the razor-thin. So sometimes this is where creativity comes in. You can try to think of really creative adjectives or nouns to describe something that really captures those people. And 5 is using metaphors and analogies to emphasize your point. And you have to be a little careful because you don't want to use way too many and then people, you lost them. But they have some examples here. My research is like fishing with a net. I'm trying to design a net with some really small holes so I can catch more fish. So people, that can instantly grab them because they're like, okay, I have no idea what you're going to tell me about your research, but I do understand the net, and I do understand that you're trying to catch something in your net. And the next one is what Megan had just said, tell a story. People love stories. And again, it has to be a short, snappy one. You don't want to go on forever. But that's a way that you can engage people and pull them in. And then the next one, be unexpected. And so you got to be careful there, but sometimes you could throw out something for people to think about, and surprise them a little bit, and then they come back. That's like with a 15-minute part that we had mentioned. If you start to show them dozing off, sometimes you can say something really quick and bring them back. And then number 8, emotional, that's really important, make people care. Because humans are emotional beings. And if a story is personally relevant, they pay attention. But again, you have to be careful not to do too much. So like when I teach medical botany, sometimes I'll go on and on about some concept, something like Alzheimer's disease. I really want them to understand, here's the symptoms, and here's what's going on in the brain, and here's all these chemicals doing different things. And we go through that, and then I say, okay, well, here's the reality. And then I tell a story about my grandmother who had it, and I have pictures and everything. And at the end, the student, you could just watch them like just drop everything, and then they're like, oh, I get it now. And so that's what helps. And then putting the numbers in context, that's what we just saw. And then finally, the answer really is, so what? And this comes back to that postal guy that I had to talk to when I was an undergrad researcher, is so what? Why should I fund your research? Why is it important? And so that's something that you want to make sure by the end of your talk, you've answered that. And you might bring that up in the very beginning. It might be at the very end. It doesn't matter. But you really want to, well, my goal is when people leave the room, I want them to go and say, okay, I learned at least one thing, and I also learned this is important, and here's why. For me, that's the so what. So when I do presentations, I do a lot, just like hardcore research presentations on what I do. I do presentations about, invasive plants to nursery people. That's a whole nother world too, where they don't, beforehand you're walking into a room of people who totally disagree with you, and you have to somehow come up with a way to convince them. And so that's very tough, but it's possible. And that's, again, getting to know your audience. So what I wanted to do next is have us work on these questions. These are the same questions here at the bottom of the sheet. But I want you guys to think about, why is your research important? If you want to focus on the research you're doing right now, why is that important? And so maybe what we could do is we can go around the table and we can say why, and it doesn't have to be perfect, just why would you say your research is important? And this is, I was going to do it first as an example, and it's sort of hard. Why is my research important? You have to go with the audience. So let's say our audience, general public, people who, probably have at least a high school or early college education, know a lot, but are not experts in the field. So it depends on, okay, so if I start off, I would say my research, if I focus on invasive plant work, that's easy. I can very easily fall into my research is very important because invasive plants make a huge deleterious impact on the world around us. Right now I've probably lost tons of people because I just used the word deleterious. And if we want to make an impact on our world and prevent non-natives from taking over other areas where other native plants are and other animals, then we need to address the problems of invasive plants and work with people all around the table, from landowners to nursery folks. Right now that's pretty long. So yeah. So what, do you have an idea if someone asks, why is your research important? And you can say pass and go back to you.
I can come back to it.
Okay. Jillian, do you have any?
Or is it beneficial to take a minute and write?
That might be
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
Gives everybody a minute and then
Yeah.
we're not sitting here. But I have,
Yeah.
so I'm doing research in math education, and whether it's with the application that I'm using now or with any type of math education, it's super important because we're not very high in math.
Mm-hmm.
Statistically around the world, America's not that great at math. And so we need to answer why. If we're supposed to be this awesome top, leader in the world, we need to set examples, especially starting in our education system. So any type of math education is super important.
So to me, that's really good because you instantly caught me because I was like, oh yeah, math education. As you were going, I was thinking, wait, the U.S. is supposed to be at the top, and what happened? And now I want to find out more. Because my next question to you would be, well, wait a minute, I thought the U.S. was there. So already you've engaged me And, because I'm thinking, okay, math, I get that.
Well, and I was thinking, like, halfway through, I was like, yeah, but why does that matter? Like, why do we have to be good at math? And you answered it.
Yeah.
And then that last part, I thought, okay.
Yeah,
Oh, there we go.
yeah,
Yeah, that's good.
yeah.
And it wasn't full of jargon. You didn't say any word that I wasn't comfortable with, or that couldn't just be in any normal conversation that you're having. And I'm sure there's things that you all talk about that
other people are
you're
like,
happy
"Oh,
to
well."
eliminate, so.
And sometimes if there's a word like you have to use, you can ask your audience further. So for example, if I'm talking about genetics, depending on the audience, I have to sometimes ask, are you familiar with what a gene is? And they might go, no. I'm like, okay, do you know what DNA is? Oh, yeah, I got that. And then you have to sort of, okay, run that level and go from there. So it's okay to ask, the audience for a little clarification. So, Lucy, yeah.
Comfortable. You did a really good job.
Yeah.
I am working with Dr. Layla Rodriguez, and she's a cultural anthropologist. And it's out of my comfort zone. That's not my area. But
Great.
she is studying the undocumented minor population of Latino immigrants that are mostly coming from Guatemala, and being set up in Cincinnati because we have Sukasa here. I'm just riffing.
No, you're
okay.
So what's Sukasa?
Sukasa is like,
People who don't
it's the oldest, largest organization that serves the Latino communities in Cincinnati. It's affiliated with Catholic Charities. And so they'll help with legal services. I think it's the only one in Cincinnati that does it, with like refugee resettlement. Legal services, education, anything that these families might need to get set up and acclimated. So the reason why this is important is because any of the scholarship about the Latino immigrants in the U.S. are coming from the perspective of the first generation kids whose parents were here, and there's a hole in the research for how to support kids that are coming here, on their own. Showing up at the border, they paid a smuggler, and a lot of them, it's just, so the story piece of this is really what struck a nerve with me when I was looking at the different projects, right off the bat, and just and so far it's been, continuously compelling, because it's not just okay, they need employment services to, support themselves throughout high school. It's because they have to pay off this debt, and they have the fear of, this person knows where I live, this smuggler, because I couldn't be, and so just all of the, but when Dr. Rodriguez pitched it, she's like, and if anybody asks, we need to know about these things because inevitably this is a rapidly growing population and they're going to have an effect on our economy.
Yeah.
She's like, put it into that perspective, this is happening, whether we know how to deal with it or not.
Right.
What do we need to do to be, serving this population?
Yeah.
So, anyway, so that's all over the place. But she's doing qualitative research and interviewing the kids, sponsors, police officers, teachers, community members, and just to get a sense of, how does the community view them? How do they view? They're mostly in Price Hill. How do they feel? How do they feel welcome? And she says, inclusive and exclusive dynamics. And I said that the first few times I talked about my research, but I kind of just,
So I noticed a few things. So number one, you had two different arguments, which is great. So one was sort of, both appealed to me, but one was sort of the social responsibility part. We have these little kids, There was another aspect of here's this whole gap in our scholarship and our knowledge. We don't know anything from the perspective of these kids. That was really good. And then you have the additional, what I call it my father-in-law perspective, of this is why you should care if you don't care about little kids.
your tax paying.
Your tax dollars at work.
Career, totally.
So oftentimes that's what we have to do, is you have to have all these alternative justifications for what you do, and you just pull out one, depending upon your audience. So I thought that was good. I do have one suggestion is, and this is very, very common, this is something most of you might be sort of struggling with, is and this is a natural progression, is right now you might be talking about my mentor, my advisor does this and this and this, which just totally makes sense. What I want you to do is sort of push yourself eventually to say, my project is this, I do this with this mentor, you know, and yes, it is his or her, you know, work and you're helping with them, but sort of take ownership of that, you know, be like, hey, this is my job. And then sometimes that's something that you get over time.
And you're probably not there just yet.
And which is
And that was
fine.
actually what I wrote down as a positive, was because we can get into a situation when sharing research that you take more credit for it than you should. And I thought you did a great job of
Yeah.
saying, this is what she's doing. And I think it's okay to say, this is what they're doing, this is what the idea was, because you know this started before you, right?
Yeah,
And now you've entered,
yeah.
and here's where you're helping.
My first interview is today, so maybe
So,
after
yeah,
today I'll
yeah.
have more ownership.
So then you
Yeah.
could say, and my first interview, yeah, that would be perfect.
But I thought that was good,
Yeah,
and I
that
thought
was good.
another thing, yeah, because you want to make sure you give credit where credit is
Yeah.
due.
Do it the right way.
And I think we talked a little bit about this at the first time that we met for your orientation, but to take on an undergraduate researcher is so much additional work, because in a lot of cases, the researcher could do this on their own, you know, and so in order for you to have the tools and the information that you need to help, they've had to do a lot of extra work just to get you up to speed, right? So I think paying tribute to that is really
Mhm.
important.
Mhm.
And then another good thing
Mhm.
that I thought you did at the very beginning when you were talking about Sukasa, being able to explain what that
Mhm.
was. You weren't just saying something that you had heard Layla say, like you knew what that was,
Mhm.
and you knew the importance of that. And you guys may have heard the term parroting, like a parrot. A lot of times, like you, as you're learning about your project and your mentor is saying these different things, you might initially be able to spit some of that back out.
It's very often,
Yeah.
it's very
And
common.
then when someone asks you a deeper question about it, it's like,
Yeah,
oh,
that's
I only knew that. Why? You know what I mean? But you were very clearly able.
I had the deer in headlight.
But
Deer in
that-
headlights moment early in the summer already.
Yeah, there
It was
you
just
go.
like talking points, gotta write this script
Yeah.
out.
But
Yeah.
now you very clear, and
That
both
was
of you
good.
did this, and we're very
Yeah.
clearly able to articulate the
Yeah.
importance, you know, so.
One thing I would add too, and this one, you didn't do this at all, but one mistake I've made is, so I worked with my undergrad advisors for a long time, and they were the ones who got me to go to graduate school, and I still work with them today. But I made the mistake early on of saying what did I say? I kept saying I work under, you know, Dr.
Oh.
Weller or Dr. Sakai.
Sure.
And, which I totally, you know, people sort of understood, but just the word, I work under someone, or I'm under this person.
Yeah.
And I ran into a really awkward situation once where I was interviewing for graduate school. I went to the University of Maryland, and I was staying with a grad student, and we were talking about something. And I said, oh, I have to go call my undergrad advisor, which I had to. Because I said something like I'm under him or something. The guy like looked at me, and he was like, what? And then I was like, oh, you're thinking that we actually have some type of relationship? No. But it was just a weird, awkward moment. And I've seen students do that. That's very, very typical. But try to remind yourself, if you fall into that trap of saying, I work under this person, or I'm under this person, trying to say I work with this person. Because that's what you guys are. You're junior researchers, but you're researchers nonetheless. And so, like I have a lot of undergrad researchers, and I consider them colleagues, if not colleagues in training. So we work together with each other. So, yeah, those are some good examples. Now that you guys are scared, you're like, oh no.
And you don't have to, if you
Yeah,
want
yeah,
to
no,
do it
this
all,
is
you're
totally
welcome to.
Yeah, if you don't want to do it right now, you can. We have another question too. You guys know what it is. You want another one?
Let's check it out.
Let's say while you know, because you know. So this might be easier in some cases. What problem does it address? What problem does your research address? Because that might be a little easier, because the first one is sort of subjective, right? You have to make an argument for why it's important when you're trying to convince someone. And at least for me, what problem does it address is a little bit more safe territory.
It made me think about, we talked about this a little bit in the orientation, but the structure of your presentation, maybe we should back up to that a little bit. As you all, I think, probably remember, we were thinking 5 to 7 minutes. And the format can generally be that what's so what now what, right?
Yeah.
So these are almost flip-flopped here, but they make
Mhm.
sense for purposes of this discussion.
We did that
So
here.
So what? Yeah, yeah, well, and I think the what is kind of the what problem does it address?
Yeah.
What does a day in the life of me as a student researcher look like? You can back up to that level as well. So what, so why does it matter? Why is your research important? Why should I care about it? The now what, and in terms of the time that you spend on each of these sections, the now what is most important for this program, because this is all about your transformation, right? It's all about your personal growth, maybe professional growth, hopefully professional growth and development as well. But even bigger than that, you guys probably have heard the vision line of the honors program a billion times, but you know, creating student, you know, empowering you to solve the world's complex problems, right? You're the top 5 to 7% of students at this institution. If you're not going to solve these problems, who the heck's going to do it, right? So the now what should be you talking about, here's why this research mattered for me, you know, why this experience mattered for me, here's why the research matters broadly, and here's how we can address this big problem. If it's a problem, maybe it's not a problem, who knows. But here's why it matters, big, huge picture. Does that make sense? And I'm thinking 60-40 is what you should shoot for. Like if you're gonna go for 6 minutes, I would spend 3 or 4 minutes on that last piece. And however you want to divide the beginning up to make sense.
That makes sense, I think.
But yeah, so
Yeah.
if you want to talk through that
Yeah.
a little bit.
Well, let's do the last one, because that might be easier. Well, it's actually connected, I guess, to the first. So
I
why?
think it depends on what lens
Yeah.
you're looking through. So is
Yeah.
it, why is your research important to yourself? Is it to the community? Is it to the world? You know?
Yeah.
And then I think, why should I, how is it going to impact
Right.
me? And think about, so the audience for this, and you guys are welcome to invite people if you want to. We're not going to do, it's at like 2 p.m. I think for the presentation. So we're not going to do a meal or anything, but we might have some light, like fruits and lunch or something. But you're welcome to invite friends or family that might want to come check this out. And we'll have academic advisors there, and we'll have, of course, the honors staff will be there. Raj Mehta will be there, and I'm trying, of course, the researchers.
So before we get to this, now that Megan just said that, I want to ask you if you guys are totally comfortable with this, or you're a little anxious.
Totally comfortable.
Cool.
You're looking scared. No, I'm mentioning, I'm bringing this up. Yeah, some of you say yes, and others are like, eh. Because I bring this up because I used to be someone who was totally shy. I did not want to speak in front of anyone. And the first time I had to do it, I literally was ill. And that's just the way it was. Through the years, I've gotten really used to it. I have no problem right now walking through classes with 300 students start talking. But I actually had to really work on that. And so what I thought maybe might be helpful, maybe this is even more important too, is just some tips, for approaching that. And so one of the things, obviously, as Megan was saying, you can have your friends there if that helps. For me, I couldn't have my family at my cottage.
I wouldn't even let Teresa watch a presentation I was giving.
That was true. You kicked me out of the room.
Go to conference. That's still me.
And that's totally okay. But one of the things that always helped me is dress to be comfortable. And it sounds because that's one thing you can control, right? You can control how your presentation looks, your slides, because you can do that. And you can control how you feel when you dress up. And so obviously, if you buy a new pair of really high heels that you haven't worn before, that's probably not the time to wear them. For me, I normally wear slacks and short heels because I'm clumsy and I'm also tall, and I also know if I'm too big of a heel, I will fall over, and I've done that. But one of the things is just wear an outfit that you feel comfortable with. It seems pretty simple, but it's also important to dress, and I don't know if you guys have gone this route either, but to dress appropriately. And so I mentioned this because there was a talk that I went to years ago with my friend, another female, and this becomes important because we were in an audience full of men, And there was a woman on the stage who was talking about acorns in oaks. And that's all I remember, because she was wearing a sundress, which actually was a very nice dress, but it had a huge slit up the side. And so she was on a stage on top, you know, above us, and every time she would fling around at the podium and point to her slide, her thing would, you know, her dress would come right open. And she had a gorgeous body, I mean. So I'm like, well, you know, someone has to do it. I sat there for a while. I was very awkward, you know, it was very awkward, and I was like, okay, this is awkward, but, you know, no problem. She's very, you know, nicely toned and everything. And so I had to lean over to my friend, and I'm like, are you noticing what I'm noticing? She's like, yes, this is weird. And all the men were just like staring at her. But to this day, I don't know what she said, except it was at Acorns and Oaks, and I remember the dress. So the problem is, you want the people paying attention to you, you want it on what you're saying, right? And your talk, rather than something else. So that's, I've never seen anyone else do it since then, but that was just one example. It was like, oh, so maybe she was really comfortable in that outfit and it worked for her. But there are some limitations. But that's one thing I do. And then another thing, once I was doing a job talk and I was wearing nylons, which I normally don't wear. I had a suit and a little skirt and everything and heels. And I was in the middle of my talk and I suddenly realized as I'm going, I had practiced my talk, and so I was doing it in my sleep, and I was like, oh, you know, jazzed up. And I suddenly realized that I was bending down, scratching my leg in front of all these people. And so I'm going on talking, in the back of my mind, I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm scratching my leg. What the heck? So I'm like very slowly going, oh, you know, that's perfectly normal. So that sometimes happens. You sometimes have these conversations in your head as you do that. But what I was going to say is, if you get nervous, like I used to, so first of all, practice, because that, at least for me, that may be much more relaxed. But one of the things is, I always shake for the first 3 minutes. I just know I shake. And I could feel the most confident in the world, but my hand just shakes. And so what I do is, when I get up there, I do things where if I know I'm going to have to pick up the stupid pointer, the laser pointer, and point it, I know it's going to go, you know.